This is Empowered Human Academy. Welcome home.
We have so much that's built inside. You just need to have like the trust and confidence and the willingness to kind of push it out and seek it out. And I think that's where the magic happens.
This is about love. This is about light. This is about the idea that you have everything you will ever need.
And this life of yours, this is where you grow, you expand, and you remember who you really are.
I'm Abe.
I'm Isaac.
In Empowered Human Academy, we join with humans of all kinds to feel the inspiration that can only come with empowered living.
The stories you hear today are unique, but the energy you hear today belongs to you too. So, with hearts wide open, let's begin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Empowered Human Academy.
Today we have my friend Mladen Ranglov, who I've worked with on some Shopify stuff and things over the past. And I'm excited. I've had a wonderful time talking to this guy who's on the other end. I don't know why I'm referring to you as this guy. Hi, Mladen. How are you doing today?
Great, Isaac. And likewise, thank you for inviting me. Like the conversations that I've had with you definitely got me excited about this and seeing how you guys have taken a very different perspective to solving problems on the Shopify lens, but also just as a general human being. So really great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. I feel like brief mutual positivity feedback loop thing, like something that I've always loved about Shopify is how I feel like, that description that you generously gave to me is how I feel about Shopify as an entity, and getting to talk with you about how y'all think about product and platform and all that. Just, I don't know, it makes me very happy at the soul level, which is a fun thing to say about software.
And yeah, when you were on the calendar for our podcast today, I was like, oh, who's this? And Isaac was like, he's a really good guy. I've been working with him for a while, or I've known him for a while. He's like really nice. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. I'm so excited. So thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
So we begin, as we always do, with like the question of identity, and not the networking version, not the role version, although there may be overlap between how you introduce yourself and the roles that you carry versus how you feel about this. But it's a question of what identity do you come home to? Like when it's just you by yourself, not trying to strike an impression, not to be anything to anyone, what words of identity feel like they really fit, that feel like home?
Yeah. So my role is a product manager. And one of the things that I love about the role and like why it was been a natural fit for me, I think, is the servant leadership part of it, and someone who's caring about things. So I've had an interesting childhood stories of moving from Europe. We can go into a little bit of that. But the servant leadership is one of the things that I get a lot of energy from, like helping others and making others happy, something that genuinely brings me, a sense of purpose and a sense of joy. And I don't mean that in like a fake kind of a way, but like genuinely doing some of those like tasks is what makes me excited. And I think that's what carries over into the product management space, and why I got into that one as well, just being able to make some of those changes into people's lives, and especially at Shopify with the mission that it's been on. So it was a nice blend of the two worlds. I started off in engineering, and it was talking about like VHDL design and like circuits and all of that stuff. But I think the true calling and like where my personality went with was with the product management, and just being able to make that impact and that difference in other people's lives. And sometimes my mom tells me all of the time, you got to think about yourself. You got to make sure you do that too. But I think there's a lot of joy of just being able to make an impact and difference in other people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so a million things I'm ready to talk about, but let's go off of that last thing, because I know like joy and satisfaction is intrinsically, like I know that feeds me. So can you talk about how, how your health, or how you nourish yourself, or how you are nourished, like how that plays into servant leadership, like how? Well, actually, can you define that firstly, and then talk about like the sustainability aspect? Like how does the self-care and self-feeding and waking up the next day feeling good fit in with that?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging part. So in terms of like the servant leadership, the way that I see it is like my role and my goal is to enable others to bring the best versions of themselves. So I want to lead people through enabling them, giving them context, getting them to see the world through a slightly different lens, but at the end of the day, empowering them to do the best things that they can do and be the best versions of themselves. And I think that's very powerful in the companies where you'll get the best out of like myself and people, is like seeing them grow, seeing them nurture, and seeing them, stumble through the same things that you've stumbled through a couple of years earlier in your career, but being able to grow and pick it up and just build that confidence. I think that's where I get a lot of the energy from. And that's the style that I like to approach a lot of the problems in the way that I help grow other people. Where it came from and everything, this is where I'll go a little bit into like the past, but not, won't spend too much time dwelling on it. But growing up, so I was born in former Yugoslavia. So it was one country that's now many, many different smaller countries. And we went through the war, like we were in the center of it. Went to a couple of refugee camps, family, friends placed, and moved into a brand new country that was Canada at the time. So we landed at a place, we were living by the Adriatic Sea, so there was milder winters, but it was mostly like nicer weather. So we came here to Canada. It was like -30, -40 degrees, crazy snowstorm. We're like, what is this place? Where did we get to it? So it was like a brand new start to life almost. Didn't really speak the language. And I think growing up and going through some of those experiences where, you don't start off with a lot, you don't know the language, you don't know the people, you go through some not as great experiences. I think that's where it made me realize and like build a lot of empathy in terms of, the struggles that everyone is going through. And this isn't like, oh, feel bad for me kind of moment, but I think just like living it and being like in those shoes for a while really kind of opened my eyes and made me appreciate a lot of things and empathize with people and trying to understand if like, what are they going through? And I think that's been something that's been like core fundamental experience that has shaped who I am and how I grow myself and I grow others. And that's where I think there's a lot of care and empathy that gets put into it. But it's always challenging, I will lie, in terms of like trying to find that right balance between, being the servant leader, but also sometimes being a leader where you need to make tough decisions, where you need to say no, where you need to realize like, hey, I can't help everyone. Like we have so many great merchants or team members or like my friends and families, like there's only so much of myself that I can give. And I need to make sure that, we're making time for, taking the time to like kind of like reflect and make sure I have the energy to support others and that I can continue to grow to be able to help and support others. And I know I went on a little bit of a tangent, but I think it ties back to kind of your question of like the energy and everything. Like it's been a tough lesson and learning the last while. And it's something I'm continuously working on of like, how do I still be that, authentic version of myself, but be able to make some of those hard decisions and know that there's a limited amount of time and energy that I can spend helping others and, take that energy and reinvest it, but also not get down on the moments where I have to say no. And I know you and I have had a lot of conversations like, hey, can Shopify, like, it's hard for me to say no, but it's like, it's the right thing. There's other bigger things to kind of help on. So that's been definitely like a big learning, and same with my team as well. So,
yeah. I hear like I don't know if optimism is the most direct word to hear or to use here, but like going through what you've gone through to phrase that in terms of, well, this is how I learned empathy. Like that tells me, at least to me, that sounds like honestly, like a really productive take on it. And some people go through things and come out like much the worse for wear as far as their life perspective goes. So I'm curious about where this is my word, not yours, so you tell me if it fits, but where the optimism comes in here and where, like how you think about the fact that you've turned, that you've brought this to a productive place of like, cool, how can we make something good together? How can I enable people? Like could have gone different. I mean, in every moment in life, we can go in several different directions, but what put you on the path of like taking that to a positive place, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I think going through all of those past experiences, like there's definitely been like very down and very tough days, but I think I've gone through a lot of moments where you've seen that there's good in people and like how they bring it out. And I think that kind of optimism is something that has driven the positivity, like in all of the doom and gloom that I was still younger. Like I remember bits and pieces, but even my parents who have gone through it, seeing how they can still end up with like a great life, make friends, and having a country with people that like they didn't really know anyone here. And people went out of their way to help and support them and help make sure that they were there. Like those are the kinds of things that just bring optimism to me in terms of like, there is a genuine good in people. And if that's there, then, great things can happen after that. It's funny because in my work life, I'm kind of the realist in the room because I want to make sure like, hey, we're thinking about the scenarios and all of that. But deep inside, I think there's always, I'm being realistic about what can happen, but I'm always optimistic in terms of where we can go and what are the things that we can accomplish as a group of people, individuals, a society, a company, whatever it is, and, personal or professional life. And that's where I think, again, like the servant leadership for me is really important and like a defining aspect of who I am, because it's about unlocking others and getting them to see what their true potential is and realize like, we have so much that's built inside. You just need to have like the trust and confidence and the willingness to kind of push it out and seek it out. And I think that's the where the magic happens. And
Was there anyone in your journey, coming to Canada, that kind of enabled that for you and gave you the space to do that? Or was it more of a community sense that you felt that?
I think there was a lot of defining kind of like moments and individuals. Like we had a close family that helped us out earlier on in the days. And like I was friends with one of their sons. And that's the first time we did like sleepovers and going skating and all of that. And I think those were the defining moments where like, they were nothing really to us. And by that I mean they weren't like relatives. They weren't really friends at the time. But the fact and how they reached out to kind of just help out and, trust me to stay at their place and vice versa and all of those things. I think like looking back, in the moment I was still a younger. So I'm like, cool, I have friends. We're going to go skating. This is going to be amazing. But like looking back and kind of taking the time to reflect on some of those events and moments really made me realize like, how great of a country and society it is, but also how great people can be to take, again, like complete strangers that have, so I have a younger brother and it was my parents as well. Like we literally came with like 2 suitcases and to be able to help out and to kind of like provide some of those opportunities. So that I think was like one of the moments, and there's been a couple of them after as well that have like where people have done similar things. That have just added up and accumulated over time for me to take a step back and realize like, hey, all of these things are what enabled me to be where I am today, and like to be grateful for the things that I have, but also to think about how can I take all of that and kind of like recontribute it back to society and recontribute it back to other ones and to continue that cycle. Because not everyone is, as fortunate as some of us are to be working where we are, to be living where we are, to be going through the things that we are.
Totally. And I think even in the short 12 minutes that we've been talking, a theme is just this enablement of other people based on your experience. Are you the only one? Well, I guess like when I think of your story, is there anyone else in your life that kind of enables people as well? Or is that something that you've kind of taken on in your community based on your experience? Because everyone experiences everything so differently. I'm just curious, like, what is it like? Is your community, is your family like that? Or is it just, you that's kind of leading the way in that?
No, definitely. Like my grandma is the one that I think we've all learned it from. So she's also been through many things, 2 wars, a lot of stuff in her life. She unfortunately has Alzheimer's now, and it's really, really tough to kind of like watch her get to that spot. But one of the things that still sticks out, like to this day, where she's at moments forgetting who we are, is like, there was a point where she was stopping eating. It's like, oh, my stomach hurts, I can't eat. And it's just like weird of like why I took her to the doctor. And then like she still remembers who I am for bits and pieces. And like one of the things she says, like, oh, I just want to make sure you guys, you have food, you guys eat first, make sure you guys are there. And then, so that was the triggering moment of like, okay, so she's not eating because her stomach hurts, but it's more of that selfless act that she's doing. So she's definitely like sacrificed a lot for us. And it's like, not fully getting emotional, but a little bit like she's definitely done a lot and kind of like set that example of what it means to be able to again, like kind of be the servant leader, but the selfless acts. And in the community as well, like she goes to church and everyone knows her church. Everyone says hi to her. She's the one that kind of like is the leading example of that, and someone that I aspire to be one day, and someone who's gone through a lot and sacrificed a lot, but is still always the cheerful, happy one when she was, and always was the one that was kind of like bringing us together and making sure that we were all having a great time.
Totally. I'm a recovering servant leader. I say that because there was a lot of my life where I was taught that was like the only way to be, or like if you weren't that, then you were like a bad leader. I did it out of shame versus not doing that, versus out of like actually wanting to. And I think what's really beautiful so far in our conversation is like, I can tell that that's like something that you're really passionate about. So I'm curious, like, what is the balance between like taking care of your needs first and servant leadership? And what's your thoughts around that?
The $1 million question and the self-struggle that to this day exists. Because I think, if I'm being very honest, there are times where I don't have like expectations of other, but you just think everyone's in the same lens. And like there have been moments that, you're kind of let down, or when you see people doing things that's, for their own self-interest, like, I don't understand. Why is that happening? So I think there's some of those moments where it's taken me a while to, I'm in a much better spot now, but like taking me a while to realize like, hey, everyone has their own motivations. Everyone has their own experience. And it doesn't mean one is right or one is wrong. And trying to also, like, for myself, find the boundary for that. So as I was mentioning, in like the personal aspect of it, like I can't always be the one that's doing things and running around. Like I need to make sure, I'm holding my team responsible. I'm holding developers responsible. Everyone else is accountable for their part and their role that they play in making all of the magic happen, rather than me trying to do it myself. And like one of the things that we talked about was like living in the States in California. So I think that was the wake up call is I was working at a startup, pulled more all-nighters there than like university and anything else combined. But I was really passionate. I really wanted to help out as much as I could. But that was my kind of like breaking moment where I just needed to leave Toronto, leave Waterloo, leave the city. And it's hard because, as I mentioned, we went through a war, so we're a very small family. I still live very close to my parents, where I just needed to kind of like get away from it all, and then realize like the breaking point of that was just me saying yes to too many things, me saying like, I'll do it. I'll cover it up. Like I'll help out. And also trying to like push myself a little bit too much, not to let kind of like others down. And I realized like, okay, now I need to take a little bit of time to also think about myself and make sure that, I'm drawing those boundaries and those lines where they need to be drawn. And again, like I need to be, and this isn't like, I'm not selfish, or I'm like, there are definitely times where that happens and has to happen. So it's just, again, like finding that right balance for me to be able to help others, but also push others where they need to be pushed and make some of those hard decisions where they need to be made. Because if I'm not in my best state of mind, I can't help others.
What's your gauge in terms of, when you feel in your best mind and in your best health, and I think that might be what I've been learning over the years, going back to the recovering servant leader, like understanding when things are healthy internally and when they're not. So what are some of your gauges when it comes to your personal, your personal health, that you say, oh, actually I'm feeling good, I'm able to serve, versus actually, no, I'm needed to delegate or say no or make hard decisions? What do those gauges look like for you?
Yeah, I've been trying to journal a little bit more and just kind of like reflect on the week. So when the days where I wake up with energy and the more days that I have like that, the more I'm like, okay, I think I'm doing a good job in finding the balance. The more days that I wake up and I'm just like, I'm drained, I'm tired, where the heck did this week go? Sometimes there's a lot of work to do, but at the same time, it just begs the question of like, are we saying no to enough things? Are we holding others accountable? So on and so forth. So those have been my signals more recently. And like I said, like the journaling aspect definitely has helped me take the time to reflect on those, because that was another thing that I wouldn't do. It's just like, life happens, you go with it one day at a time, but taking those moments to take a step back and reflect. And now I see the signs in myself, and like those are the more the telling ones. Like I know my energy levels, and when the energy level is there and high, I'm like, all right, this is going to be great for myself and hopefully everyone around me. But when it's low, like I need to kind of like reflect back on what's causing that, and is it something that's wrong in the system, basically, and is this the tripwire that I hit that I need to investigate a little bit more, using the PM hat that I'm putting on and using those words.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's really fascinating. Like our bodies and our minds and our energy really communicate to us if we just give them the simple awareness of, acknowledgement. Right. And that's really cool that you're doing that for yourself right now.
You talked about like the magic happening when there's trust and confidence, and something that I'm super curious about is how to lead. I don't even know if this is the right way to think about this, but like how to lead other people to a place where trust feels safe. Like we all have different histories and levels of comfort with trust and different kinds of trust. What's your perspective on like introducing other people to trust, like adding that to a situation where people have varying levels of comfort and ability with the concept itself?
Yeah. So this is one of the things where it's hard to for me to explain, because I think it's something that I don't want to say naturally happens, but like what I try to do is genuinely like build the relationships with people and get to know people a little bit more and a little bit better. I think from the product management, like when I look back in my career, like there's some product that are like, oh, we're amazing at design, we're amazing at this. I think for me, like what I not necessarily pride myself, but what I'm happy with is like being able to have teams that are healthy teams, and that we're all here to have a great time and make a huge impact and can be like open and honest with each other. One of the things that has always been a learning, and it's been a while, is like the healthy debate part. Anytime that the word the debate would come up with someone who tries to think about others, is like, oh shit, this is a bad word. Sorry that I swear as well, but like this is a bad word. 2 bad words in a row, debate and shit. But like this is a bad word. Like I don't want to debate. I don't want to get into conflict and those ones. Until I realized like there is a version of like healthy debate that exists where people are comfortable enough to be giving you their raw opinion and trusting enough that, when they say it, you're going to take it in the right fashion, in the right way, and use it as feedback to improve the situation. So for me, like what I try to do with my teams is exemplify some of those things. Call times when I fuck up, because, hey, I'm a human here. Like if the decisions and things I make aren't going to be perfect, if they're right like 60% of the time, that's amazing. And same with the feedback as well, like eliciting that and like thanking people for it, because genuinely at the end of the day, I feel more confident and I feel better when we can have a group of amazing people come together and rip apart an idea and say like, that makes no sense. Why are we doing that? Is that really the right thing to do? Like, have we thought about this? Well, like that is where I think like creating that environment where people are comfortable about each other, caring about each other's kind of growth as well, and confident that they can say really what may seem like harsh things to each other, but in a way that comes off as a sign of care. Like feedback, when they say feedback is a gift, like it took a while for me to like to realize, but it really is, because like getting into that deep feedback is something that is tough to do, because people have to be vulnerable. People have to be open to give that kind of feedback, but also receive it and know what to do with it. So creating that environment where everyone can, again, like have the healthy debate, hold each other accountable, move fast, but at the end of the day, know that we're a bunch of flawed humans here on a mission to solve a problem or to make something better, and that we all have our strengths and that we all have our weaknesses. And as a team, like, we have to realize those ones and take the best out of each other, but complement each other as well. Like, once, that magic moment happens, I feel like the team is unstoppable afterwards. Mm-hmm. And it's always like, I think like the moments in the trenches are the ones where you kind of like build those relationships where you got to roll up your sleeves, solve a tough problem or do something. I think that's where people kind of like build them the most. So those are the kinds of things with the team where it's like, okay, we got this. This is when we got to solve it. And it takes a while. But, one of the things that I try to do constantly with the team is have, retros or looking back moments. And sometimes I would see them with like, the PM did not do a good job of X, Y, and Z. And it's not me like trying, but like, it's me calling out myself, like, you guys were not set up for success because, hey, these, your requirements or the goal wasn't clear, or I wasn't present when this was happened, or like those things. And I think they realize like, hey, if I can be self-critical and someone who's supposed to be leading the team, I should be confident enough to be able to, give feedback, but also call that out myself. And that's where I think, once that happens, again, like the magic happens because everyone wants to be the best version of themselves. Everyone wants to help each other out and create that space where the growing, the learning, and the magic can happen. And, you trust each other and you're winning and losing as a team at the end of the day, but everyone has some, like care and skin in the game because these are your, I don't want to use the word friends, but almost friends. And like, these are your counterparts that are spending so much of their lives with you that are, in this game together.
Yeah, I hear that. I resonate with this super, super hard. You've used the word care a couple of times, and I hear it like bleeding out of what you're saying. Like, there's a lot of care in the way that you're describing the situations. So I've got two questions here. Like, A, what is care? And B, how do you, feel free to place the second part with whatever. A, what is care? B, how do you sync up on that with the teams that you're all kind of carrying in a compatible direction?
Yeah. And caring, I think there's a lot of nuance and things that are tied to that word. I think at the end of the day, how I look at it is everyone is lifting each other up and, pushing, like raising, the tide is raising all the boats. So as long as everyone's pushing each other up and helping them make the best versions of themselves, I think that's where, again, like the genuine care comes from, is you're investing in someone else or you're creating an environment where others can grow. So it doesn't necessarily mean, like, for me, care doesn't mean like, oh, we're going to be Canadian here. We're going to be like super polite and super nice and
Sure.
all of those things. It means those things, like you're caring by giving sometimes that very harsh feedback, but knowing that the person is going to be a better person tomorrow than they were today. And you're caring by being able to, like do something that is not your job or not your role, because you want to take one for the team and you want to help out with some of the things that need. So that's where I use the word a lot of times, because I think there's a lot of morphing and like use cases that it comes through, but it's really the betterment of others and the betterment of yourself in a fashion that, everyone is growing together and, making the best version of themselves possible.
Yeah. Is that a sort of thing that like people just pick up on, or do you have like to the question about like, how do you sync up with the team so that you're all
sorry.
Like no, you're good. To the question of like, how do you sync up with the team so that you're all kind of doing this in a way that works well together? Is that something that people just pick up and exhibit naturally as a result of relationship? Or are there like explicit conversations to be had about this? Like, how does that get established?
I think most of it, and this is where like Shopify now is like remote by digital. So it's been an interesting change. In the real world, I think it's a little bit easier to kind of like build those muscles and like build that environment where you're able to do it. So what I spend a lot of the time doing is like team events, where we're just getting to know each other, just being, vulnerable, telling some of these stories and spending time to understand who we are as as people and the things that we have gone through it, and investing a bunch of time for that. So it's not just like, oh, we're doing a team building event because it's a team building event and it's a checkbox to check, but being very intentional on what to make and how to make of those ones. So for example, like what I make sure that we always do is like a team dinner or a team lunch. Food is amazing for many reasons, nourishing the body, sure, but like just bringing everyone and like letting everyone kind of like be their natural selves. I find it is a way where people can just kind of start bonding. And, as a leader, but as leads, like we're the ones that we also got to kind of like set the stage of what's, appropriate and like lead by example. So I think those are some of the things that I try to myself do in terms of like helping out and doing those ones and calling out some of the good behaviors in terms of like, hey, that person helped that one, like, or someone who came to help me when they didn't need to, and so on and so forth. But just making sure like people realize like what is valued and what is kind of like recognized, and me as a leader being able to kind of exemplify those behaviors, not just, talk the talk, but like walk the walk as well, and make sure that they understand like what I think is important for us as kind of like a team to be able to do. So those are some of the patterns. And as I mentioned, like anytime that we can do like retrospectives or get to kind of like look back and reflect, I found those to be more and more, useful, and ways that also that the trust is built, and that, and again, like the bad moments, the trenches, like if things go late or things go, like those are other scenarios where we can hold each other accountable and really have those tough decisions of like, why did that ball drop? How did it drop? How do we do it better? So we're not calling the person out. Like there were other circumstances and things like that. You're not saying, hey, you're a bad developer, you're a bad designer, you're a bad PM, but like, what are the things that we could have done differently as a team? Who could have helped out? And that's where I find like the more that we do it, the more the positivity changes of like, hey, that person helped me out, or new people joining in the team. They're like, this is a very supportive team, because like those are the patterns and behaviors that I think, help teams become the best versions of themselves, but more importantly, help people realize their potential and become the best versions. Even if we take the jobs out and everything, but just as human beings of like, how can we be those constant learners, have that growth mindset and all of that side, and realize like the true power that we have in unlocking that kind of power, and not letting, past experiences or a lack of experience or whatever is hold us back or hold us down.
That reminds me, we watched a Netflix documentary of the making of Frozen 2, and there were all these executives and creators and artists and everyone in kind of one room. And there were times where like 4 weeks before the premiere, they're like, we don't have some of this shit ready. Like, what the hell is going on? And even like in this global brand like Disney, 4 weeks before premiere, there are these people who are in the trenches. When I think of the trenches, I think of that documentary where they're just like, we're cutting out the bullshit and we're just going to say it straight up. And like, this is what needs to happen. But and it's not personal. It's just like, we're all on the same team. Let's make things happen. And that's what I think about. And you were talking about like fostering an environment of care and as that pertains to kind of building trust. How you as a leader, how are you cared for the most? What's your connection to care for yourself?
That's a great question. One thing that I wanted to add in terms of the trenches, the one very interesting learning that we had during one of the retros was the whole team loved deadlines. I was like, so that was interesting to me, because I was like, deadlines are usually like one of those scary things, like, oh, we have this deadline. But they're like, we need some of those deadlines because that's going to help us do our best work. And I think the bigger thing that I learned from that is, like you mentioned, that it creates that environment of like being more in the trenches. And that's where you get all of the creativity flowing and people really thinking about like, shit, we have to hit this date. And, if we hit it, huge milestone, huge party. If we don't, there's going to be more learnings from it. But it creates that environment of like kind of like being in the trenches. But anyway, so I just wanted to share that one, because I think that was one of my kind of like bigger surprises, where earlier in my career, deadlines were just like, oh my God, we have this deadline, we have to do it. Why do we have to do it? But when the team is just like, we need deadlines, like that's going to help us stay focused. That's going to help us, push ourselves and push everything. It's become part of what we're doing and how the team works. And it's like, all right, we have there are some real deadlines, but even for projects, there's like, this is when we need to hit it. This is where, like, if we don't make it, we need to rethink, like, are we going to continue investing? Are we not going to continue investing? But like that has created that environment. So sorry, I totally went on a different.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm going to ask you about how are you cared for, but later. I think when I think of what you're talking about, deadlines and pressure, I think that that's connected to actually the environment of trust that you're creating. Yes. Because if someone's under pressure in a trusted environment, that's totally different than, you know, back in the day where our ancestors like were under pressure to like feed our families in famine or whatever it is. Like, I mean, even like our ancestors, like our primal ancestors, where they're just trying to like survive. I think that we're in a fortunate position, especially in tech, like if there's an environment that has pressure for a deadline, I think that there's creativity that comes out of a space that is grounded in trust while there still is a deadline. And that just, that thought kind of came to my mind because it's totally different than a more traditional, like, oh, I don't have trust in this work environment. I hate my life. Everything's going on and I have a deadline. Like that's a recipe for disaster versus actually let's have this be a kind of a component of a restriction or what's the word?
Constraint.
A constraint that enables or inspires creativity and also connection, breeds connection.
Yes, that's didn't even think about that. Amazing point.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
That's compelling. I'm off on like my own internal tangent right now of like recasting a vilified dynamic like the deadline and putting that into context where people like care about each other and about the work and using that as not necessarily saying like deadlines, let's pull that in and make sure we use it as something useful, but like discovering it to be something useful and then being flexible enough of mind to go like, oh, okay, maybe we can lose the baggage around this term and actually embrace it as something
the word
useful.
Deadline, like the line is dead. Like that is like the word is probably derived from back in the day when like that word meant like you will get fired or there is something on the line here. And granted, a lot of things are on the line all the time, but I think we can maybe have a different relationship with that word. I don't know.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, it is like the survival instincts in the survival mode. And as you mentioned, like fortunately in tech, like there are still a lot of startups that I've been a part, some who aren't around and, you know, you got to keep the momentum going. But like, I think again, what was the most surprising thing for me was people like seeking it out. And I think you're absolutely right. Like the difference is the environment that was created to be able to do some of those things and realizing like, hey, if I have this deadline, everyone's going to think about the work that they have to do. Like, is it important? Is it not important? Where can I help out with others? Like, what am I good at? And it just creates that space where, you know, you realize like, hey, I don't know this, but I know that person knows it. Let me go talk to them. And then relationship is formed. Or like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I'm a little bit behind on this project. Someone else raises their hand, be like, hey, I can help you with that. So I think those are the things that, again, happen after the fact. But I think you're absolutely right and spot on in terms of, I think that, again, like that trust and that care and that foundation is important to have that environment for that to be able to happen and to occur. And again, like I'm using those two words and like, I don't want it to seem like it's this like fairy tale la la land and like where magic happens and, you know, everyone always does their best. Like there's always going to be bumps and bruises. There's always going to be hard decisions in terms of projects, people, so on and so forth that has to be made. So I don't want to kind of like shy away and just, you know, think that we're in this utopia where everything is magical and perfect. But I think it does more good and creates more of those things. But we also have to be kind of like realistic and know when to, you know, to take the servant leadership hat on and not let ourselves just be trampled with and taken advantage of, but that we're helping open doors and everyone's helping each other. And, you know, if people are, you know, letting down the team or things like that, like those moments are acted on as well.
You know, Isaac has taught me kind of he's in his communication and the way he works, he's kind of taught me about building with systems. And I think like it can, when a foundation that has trust and a foundation that is grounded in, of course, we're not perfect, but majority, you know, health and majority trust, I think that it can overcome or the momentum can still kind of trample through or move forward through the hard times, through the bumps and bruises, because the foundation isn't really rocked. And I feel like, how many times has Shopify or any big company gone through the bumps and bruises? Like, how many times have Apple gone through like so many lawsuits and patent like whatever, trademark whatever wars? Like, but it's still it's still a grounded product. Well, it's still a product because of the grounded state of play. I don't know. Does that make sense? So I'm thinking I'm just thinking of an environment of trust plus like intensity. Like, you think of workouts, right? Like, you don't have a good workout all the time, but if you're in a healthy space, or you're working out with a trainer that you really trust, then it's okay to fall flat on your ass and flat on your face, because you can get back up. And that doesn't mean that every workout's going to be amazing and, you know, fairy tale. But I just think that that's such a powerful, like, if we're going meta here, like having an environment that's super foundationally sound can, you know, help all that. Anyways, random thought.
No, it's not random at all. Like, there's a long game aspect to this, right? It's go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, that point is the spot on. Like, it's all about the long game as well. Like, for some of these things, like the way that I aspire to continue to lead and the way that I try to grow teams, I'm always trying to think about like the long game for myself and for everyone. Because there are the ways, like, I've worked in many companies where there are the ways that you can get productivity and you can get results, but the trade-off that you're making is going to be on the tenure of people, the burnout of people, so on and so forth. So unless you have the right incentives and people are just, willing to be like, cool, I'm getting a lot of money thrown, or I'm getting to do this, and kind of like not think about those. If you look at tech, the average tenure rate, year, 2 years, 3 years is like, holy crap, you've been at some of the places. Whoa. Like, it's different, and I'm generalizing here, but like, I think that's kind of the balance, and that's something that's important to consider as well. Is like, there are ways to drive results, there are ways to get people to get things, out and done. But I think this is kind of the more humane. And I know that's like a silly word to use in the business context, but I think it's a humane thing that's a win-win-win for everyone at the end of the day.
Totally.
Okay, so that little tiny, like, maybe silly to use the word humane in the business context, like, this is like this actually, like, that little pinpoint of maybe amusement, maybe a hair of chagrin. Like, I get a lot of joy out of that specifically because I see, like, what I do anyway in business, and if I may be terribly presumptive, what I see Shopify doing in business, I see that as like I don't know, like it all ladders up to what, like, to humanity evolving or something like that. And that's what I want to ask you, because you alluded to something that I think was related anyway earlier. I forget the specific context was, but something to do with like the care that we cultivate here, the relationships that we cultivate here. Like, it has direct and practical applications for like how we build and ship software. But also this is just like humanity learning. And I'm putting a lot of words on the table that you didn't speak. So this is the part where I ask you, like, how do you think about what happens here as a part of the whole? Like, how are those connected? Like, what's the self-similarity in the system? I'm using way too many words. What do you think about all of this?
Yeah. And when you say as a whole, you mean like as a society, as a world that we live in, and all of those?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where, like, I think it has to start from somewhere. And the reason that I was saying humane is, like, I don't think like businesses are set out to solve a problem. And I mean, like, in the current state and the world where, there's a lot always going on. Society has, evolved and changed with, social media, capitalism, so on and so forth. Like, I won't go into those topics, but I think it's an important aspect to take a step back and to, again, like, think about the bigger picture. And, if I'm on my deathbed in the future and looking back at, my life and my career, I spend probably like 50 to 60 hours a week with coworkers and at work. So it's a big part of, who I am and how it defines me, and also where I can make a lot of the impact. So I think, starting it off there and starting that as kind of like a ripple effect, it feeds into other things and, hopefully expands with others when they can see that, business objectives, business outcomes, and all of the things that we need to do can still be reached and potentially met with a little bit more of the care aspect. And I think, as you were mentioning, it's even more important in Shopify because it builds a lot of empathy that we're in these very trying times and we're trying to make an impact and help as many people succeed, help as many people, keep food on their table. And again, like that's one of those things where like it ties deeply into what I genuinely care about and like going through those circumstances where we necessarily didn't have food on our tables because you're going through a war and all these situations of like, how can I create some of those environments to make sure that people are understanding that there's a bigger picture here. Like we're making an impact, not just from Shopify's perspective, but with the way that we approach with things, the way that we think about products, the way that we can empathize with, our users and their living experiences and have as much of that diversity of thought and things there. I think once you sprinkle those elements in, like it'll make the products hopefully a little bit better, which will enrich people's lives and make them better, which will make hopefully society a little bit better. And that's where kind of like that network effect and that flywheel hopefully kicks in and takes over. But it has to kind of start from somewhere.
Well, and people can feel that aliveness, right? Like you go to a company or you experience something and you're like, oh, these people are just robots and versus people who are super nice, like Shopify folks. And that's kind of like, I'm biased, but I feel like Shopify is a beautiful example of like caring plus capitalism. And it's like, I mean, it's in commerce, right? The definition of like money in a lot of ways, but then also like we're putting the care aspect into helping people. You have a question?
I do. You say it has to start from somewhere. And I'm thinking about like all the people that I know who are in like professional or familial or social situations where like the care and the empathy and the lifting each other up is not there. How like imagining that you're sitting down with someone like that who is open to hearing, like not to be presumptive about anyone's situation, but how do you begin? Like you say, it has to start somewhere. Where and how might that start? What would you say to somebody who like might be in a team environment where that's not a thing, or any other environment in their life where that's not a thing? What would you say?
I think you raised like the magical bullet point of just like the empathy part of it. Like people's lived experience, what they've gone through and why things are happening. It's always easy to judge and assume the worst case, but like thinking about it from a positive intent and like taking the time to step back. And again, like this is where the product manager in me is like, there's a problem. Here's 50 potential solutions for it. But the way that I think about it is like, here's how someone is acting. Let me spend the time thinking about the 50 scenarios that could actually be happening where there's information that I know, but there's probably a lot of information that I don't know to assess what's going on and why it's going on. So I think it's a mindset shift of like, put yourself in another person's shoes, but like, it's really like take the time to try to guess what's happening and seeing like, if it's a pattern that's constantly repeating all the time, then it's something that's more ingrained and it's part of who they are and might be harder. But like, if it's just a one-off event or something, like taking the time to empathize and to understand and to kind of like peel the onion back, I think is important. And that's where, again, going back to, getting to know people, who they are. Like a lot of the things that shaped us is like our past experiences while we're going through where we are. And I think, building the empathy there to understand and like, you don't have to necessarily like genuinely care and be like pretending like I care about everyone, but like just listen and take the time and the energy to just hear their experiences, to acknowledge them as human beings that are, as flawed as I keep mentioning as yourself, and to take that moment to do that, I think is the first skill and the most, from my perspective, the most important one to start this whole process off. And it always has to be a balance, because I think there is the part where, you don't want to be naive either and just like assume everyone, I think that's the lesson for me that I've had to learn throughout my career is like, there are some people that are raised and are motivated by other things that can be very, very different from mine. And I just have to understand, acknowledge that, and not see them as like bad people here, but that's who they are, and accept that. So I think that's the kind of like the balancing act, but like taking the time to understand and ask some of those questions and really go deeper is the starting point. And then once you start building that empathy, I think everything else, like, you start thinking about it from different perspectives. You see how others are acting, and then that's where then the flywheel starts spinning. And then once more people do it, and once more positive things happen, it just continues to positively spiral.
I think it's because, like, you use the word flywheel. Like, I now have kind of like a physical metaphor in my head that somehow involves like a balance board between like permissive allowing and like assertion making hard decisions. Like in the servant leadership thing, like being there to empower and lift up other people. And then on the other side of the balance board, like, I don't know if deadline is the right example to use here, but like not asserting your position, but like making a call, like I don't know. I'm hearing, not attention, but I'm hearing like a,
it's about
there's
balance.
time to lean into like allowing, and there's a time to lean into control, assertion. I don't know what word to use here. How?
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
I think you're absolutely like spot on. Cause like where servant leadership can get to is like, people are just going to walk over and trample you, and it can create a situation where like you're doing all the work, the team is not holding each other accountable, then everything falls apart. So I think it's that healthy tension of like, you want to help and you want to enable, but you also want to hold people accountable things. And again, like the end goal is they're going to be pushing themselves, they're going to be growing, but they're also going to be making a positive impact that's going to continue that wheel, and others will see them doing some of those things. So I think that's the hard balance where, earlier in my career was like probably a little bit too much one way and so much, and then I just get frustrated about things, like, why isn't the team doing this? And there's no outlet for it. That was a healthy one. But now realizing like, hey, when I have to call people out in terms of like, why was that late? Like, what happened there? Like, what about those things? People take more kind of like responsibility, ownership, and realizing like, I had all of the tools and I just, I didn't want to do it. I didn't have the energy. And you can have those conversations. But like I said, like most of the time you still have to take that positive intent and realize like what's going on in their lives. Like, is there something behind the scenes? But if we're not holding each other accountable, like, again, like everything starts to crumble after that.
And yeah, I think, one can be a servant leader and also, or one can be kind and clear and direct about the feedback. And just because someone gives feedback or pushback doesn't mean that you're a dick, or it doesn't mean that you're, you're malintent. You know what I'm saying?
The three of us are all like kind of in leadership positions of a sort. Is this, and this question may sound overly simplistic, I'm going to go for it. Is all this applicable to non-leadership positions / have you been in non-leadership positions and this has been useful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, like anyone can play the role, and anyone can play that starting off spot, and like helping create that environment, I think is, everyone's job. Like, I can't force people, like I can help create the environment, but other ones can as well. People can raise their hand, and many in my previous lives, when I was the kind of like the IC in the role, be like, hey, these are the things that I've done. This is what I want to try to create. And you just kind of go with it. Again, like, you have to, be comfortable enough to take some of those risks, and you have to have, the right kind of environment for it. Yeah. But I think it's something that anyone can do at any time, personal lives, professional lives, even personal life. Like, I think, with family, with friends, with my partner, like the relationships that you create, having that, again, like that strong trust, that vulnerability, but also some of those hard conversations makes all of us better humans. And knowing like when we get into those disagreements, like the outcome is always going to be good, and we're going to be better versions of ourselves because we're realizing something that we may not have and that other person is, and knowing that everything comes from a positive intent point makes it a little bit more kind of enjoyable. Obviously, there are times where, it's just different opinions. You got to agree to disagree and like accept it and go your own way. But I think a lot of it is, enabling that environment to be created to help others be, again, I keep mentioning it, but I think it's an important thing of like really the best versions of ourselves, and to use whatever precious time that we have here to like make the impact and to leave the legacy behind that we can be happy and proud of.
We usually end the podcast off with 2 questions, but before that, I have 2 quick questions. So like speed round, because we're running out of time.
All right.
Number one, how are you cared for? How are you cared for as a leader? I'm coming back to it because I'm really curious.
By my managers, you mean, or by the environment, or like, well,
how do you feel cared for? Like, what is important for you in terms of your care when it comes to you're a servant leader? So who cares for you?
Yeah. And I think this is where, having, as I'm looking to, like, as I've been joining companies and later in my career, realizing how important it is to be in a company that has that environment, but also the manager that has that environment. So I think that's an important part of, making sure that I can have that environment and that our values align. So earlier in the career was like, let me try to get the job. But now it's like, let's make sure it's a right fit both ways. And having some of those conversations and realizing, like, even if it's your dream job, if the environment is not aligned to kind of like the values, or that it's, like totally different, it's not somewhere where I can succeed. It's not somewhere that I'm going to be doing my best work. And it's a lose-lose for, again, like everyone in that situation. So I just make sure that, any company that I join or any manager that I work for, that I can have the things that I need to create that environment. And that's like, having the strong trust, being able to have enough of the, which leads to being able to have some autonomy and being able to make sure that I can grow and lead the team the way that makes sense, while still being accountable for the result.
Totally. This next question could be literally another podcast episode, but feedback. Curious. Your perception of what's your relationship to feedback and receiving it and taking things, or how do you, if someone gives you feedback who you don't respect or trust, what's that environment like? Because I've had plenty of bosses in the past where I had no respect for or no trust. And I'm not going to I don't want to be like them. I hear a lot of my friends say, like, why would I take advice from someone I don't want to be like, or an environment that I don't want to be in? So when do you take feedback and you run with it? When do you not? Is there a middle ground?
Yeah.
1 minute.
So for me, I have my personal values at the end of the day. And that's where I keep going back to product. Like, there's the must-haves and there's like the nice-to-have. So I would think about like, what is very important to me, and is this aligning with like my values and what I want to do? And if it's something that's a big red flag or a big no-no, it's been hard, but that's where I accept, like, does this mean that I'm going to plateau here? And if that's the case, completely cool. But like, there are some things that are more important to me than just like necessarily the career progression. So I think in terms of the feedback, it applies as well. Like, I'll take it and listen to what they have to say, understand and like reflect on that, and then realize, like, if it checks my boxes off of like, yep, it's with the values, then I'll act upon it. If it doesn't, then I will either disagree or just, say like, cool, I appreciate it and I genuinely do, but it's not something that I feel like I can, grow into or change it to.
I love that. Awesome.
As we close, 2 questions. First question is, what does an empowered Ladin look like and feel like?
Oh man. This is an exciting one. So I think like where you'll see me on the high of highs is like when my energy is running super high. I'm hyper, I'm excited, I want to solve things, I'm reading things, I'm just on a go spree, and I'm spending, I wake up in the morning realizing the problem of like, oh, last night I remember that this is what I wanted to do. So I think that's when I'm most empowered is, again, like waking up with a fresh perspective and excitement for the day ahead, the problem ahead, and like life ahead. And more importantly, in the company of people that are, going to be able to help me do that or help me see that through. So again, like seeing the smiles on their faces or the people's, like that's where I feel super empowered and super excited. So that's me.
I feel like we need to hang out in real life because I'm very similar. I love like my mind racing, but not in a bad way, but just like eager and excited. So can't wait to hang out in Toronto one day. Last but not least, what do you know for sure?
I should have prepared for this one. Jeez. This might come off as mundane, but we're all going to end up where we started off, from the ground and back in the ground. And again, as mundane as that sound, I think it's something that, makes me realize and appreciate and put life into a lot of perspective. And again, like going through the experiences, it's sometimes very easy to kind of lose sight of the privilege that we have and the opportunity that we have. And it's sometimes, again, like very easy to get caught up in our first world problems and some of those things. So being able to kind of like take a moment back and appreciate. And again, as mundane as that sounds, it always kind of reminds me of like, it doesn't matter where in life you are, it doesn't matter all of those things. Like we all end up in the same place. So how can we make sure that we're leaving a better place and creating that positive impact behind us? And that's one thing that's unfortunately for sure, but I think it's, I'm going to do a quick anecdote, but I was living in California for a little bit, and like, I would try to get my friends out to the beach, like, oh, but it's going to be sunny tomorrow. It's fine. Whereas in Canada, it's a different mindset where it's like, crap, we have 3 months of summer. If we're not using every single day to the best and enjoying it and like living our full lives, we're going to be stuck indoors for the rest of the time. And I think that's kind of like that similar mindset of like, there's this fixed time. Like, how can we make sure that we're doing what makes us happy and we're doing things that can hopefully, again, like leave that positive impact behind and legacy. So
I love that. You made Isaac cry. That's so sweet.
I feel the passion in that. There's a book on my desk here from a friend called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, and it feels like directly connected.
I need to read that one. I have not.
We've got like this interval, and this is what we have to do with it. Mladen, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate this so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
This podcast is the work of Lightward, our company, named for that toward the light direction which informs every single thing that we do, including money, which means, like everything else, the way we earn revenue is not based on industry norms. It's based on what feels deeply right and aligned by passing through the door that feels like it has more behind it, not less. And the way we keep this podcast going is all Lightward. It's pay what feels good. It's an exchange of value between you and us. We're keeping conventional podcast advertising totally out of this. And here's how Pay What Feels Good works. We give you this episode because it feels good to do so. And you consider, honestly, what number of dollars this episode is genuinely worth to you. I do not care if that's $3, $1,000, or literally $0 and a heart emoji, as long as that trade genuinely makes your day better. And the energy there is the entire point. That is what we're building our business on. No advertisers, no selling your attention, just you and us, trading value in a way that builds us both up. So whatever the number, when you're done listening, head to empoweredhumanacademy.com and hit the Pay What Feels Good button. We use this policy across all of our company's work, and I'm really excited to bring it here to the world of podcasts. This is us voting for the world we want to see. Thank you for being here.